So in this part, we're going to talk about the successful partnerships and why they work. Generally, successful partnerships work because the two people realize that a partnership ebbs and flows and people are willing to give and take as needed in a good relationship, just like in many relationships. If you aren't willing to give sometimes, you shouldn't be able to get later whenever someone asks something of you. So asking for that person to run the payroll or how to hire the right person, whatever it may be, there's just a lot of pieces that come into it. It's really hard to have a good partnership. You've got to both be aligned on many different levels. You got to be aligned from a business perspective, from a clinical treatment philosophy perspective. You have to be aligned from a management style. You've got to be aligned from how you view the business in your life, and everything goes along with that. Because as an example of that, if one partner wants this business to be like a lifestyle type practice where they're only working maybe 3 days a week clinically, and the other dentist wants to turn the world on its head, you're going to have a problem in that partnership because you do not align from a how you want this business to run. Eventually, that doctor who's there 5 days a week or even 6 days a week doing dentistry, and there's a doctor there that's doing 3 days a week of dentistry, something's going to wobble in terms of the balance and everything's going to fall off the rails. So you have to be really careful with that in any partnership. So a successful partnership is the opposite. There's equilibrium, there's balance. The two partners are very in line with how they want to run the practice, how they want to run the business, where they want to end up, and how they get there. So it's complicated. And you're going to probably need to like your partner as well. Because if you don't, then working with someone that you don't like for a long time will grind on you. Being an owner with someone that you don't even like will grind on you even more. There are successful practices out there and partnerships that are out there, but they have to be aligned in those categories in order for it to be a huge success. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about partnerships at different stages of the life cycle for dental practice owners. I've qualified this into really like startup phase, to where it's like brand new owners, to where it is people that are in the in-between startup and established, and then beyond. I mean, by beyond established, I'll get there in a second. So partnerships in relations to a startup dental practice. You would be surprised how many doctors come to me saying, hey, I've got my buddy here and we're going to go do a startup dental practice as partners. And that's great. I love the fact that people are willing to join forces and try and make things work together as a team. However, startup practices are hard, even when it's just one person. Have you ever heard me talk about the capacity of a dental practice, just in terms of visualizations of this? A startup dental practice is an empty dental practice. There are no patients in that practice. And conceptually, if you think about that practice, it can fit, if there's one dentist, generally somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500 patients. Well, what happens if you have two dentists there? Well, all of a sudden the capacity is now not 1,500 to 2,500. Now it's 3,000 to 5,000 is the capacity for that practice. Just because you have two dentists there doesn't mean that roster of patients is going to fill any faster. I've never seen anything that has said to me that having two dentists at a startup practice increases new patient flow whatsoever. If it does, it's got to be a very minor percentage. What that means is that from just like a mathematical formula perspective, if there's two dentists there and you're getting 40 new patients a month, then you're going to get about 500 new patients every year. To get to, say, 1,500 patients, it's going to take you 3 years to fill up that practice, to fill for one dentist. That 40 new patient flow is still going to be the same whether you have two dentists there or one. So instead of taking you 3 years to fill to capacity, now it's going to take you 6 years to fill the capacity. So that's a challenge. It's a big, big challenge for startups because you're just going to be slower out the gate. You're going to basically, whatever your growth rate is, it's actually half for you filling capacity in terms of filling up the meter of the roster of the patients. So for that reason, I do not recommend startups be partnerships. Can they work? Yes, they can. Have we had clients that have made it work? Yes, we have. But those people are really the exceptions more so than the rule. In addition to that, we also see a lot of people come to us and say, hey, I'm going to be opening up the startup in a partnership, and this other guy is going to be my partner, and he's the business guy, and I'm going to be the dentist. That also, you can make it work. You can make anything work in this world, but that's a challenging one to make work because there's just not enough cash flow to go around typically. In terms of the way that cash flow works inside of the startup practice, there's generally 6 to 18 months before there's actually positive cash flow. And as soon as there is, and that silent partner usually wants to start recouping their money and making their money back. And I'm personally not convinced that silent partner actually provides a whole lot of value in those startup side of things. Like maybe they can tell you a little bit about hiring, but they're probably not going to be there every day making sure that manager is doing their job, or making sure that front office person knows how to enter their stuff into the computer systems, or all the hundreds of things that you have to do on a day-to-day basis to actually run the business, that regardless of if a startup practice owner wants to think of this or not, usually the dentist is the person that's there. So they're the ones who are going to have to make those decisions and make those shots, tell people what to do, train, and all the logistics of running the practice are going to fall back on that dentist almost every time, even if that silent partner is saying, hey, I've had a lot of success in business, so I'm going to be your business partner with doing this thing. Pretty challenging to me to say to do that. Whenever I get on a call with people, I tell people basically the same thing I'm saying to you guys right now. We don't have any clients that have had success with that. We've had a few clients come through that have tried that, and there was not a lot of success with it. So for that reason, those types of partnerships in the startup phase, I don't see them working very well, but doesn't mean it's not possible. It's definitely possible. But on average, I would say that dentist needs to beware in those types of setups. So let's move from the startup phase into the in-between startup and established. So to me, established means usually somewhere around the $1 million to $1.5 million in revenue stage. So in between 0 in revenue to 1 million in revenue, you'll say like $600,000, $800,000 a year. That is a phase where sometimes people that have done the startup route start feeling a little bit overwhelmed with all the stuff that's happening from a business perspective. They start thinking like, maybe I should get a partner in here because this is hard and I don't like doing all this business stuff. Maybe if I get a partner, then I can split the amount of work that I have to do with somebody else, and that's going to make my life a little bit easier. Unfortunately, the same thing kind of falls under the startup route. So maybe we've gotten from that 1,500 patient roster, we've gotten to say, I don't know, 800, 900 patients, and we're closing in on capacity. The challenge is if you bring that new person in, you go from having capacity for say 600 patients to having capacity for 2,100 patients, but then you're going to have a whole nother mouth to feed in the form of that other partner. It's just the cash flow just doesn't work. You don't make it very much money. It prolongs how much cash flow you have. And it just is a really challenging time to bring a partner into that ecosystem and environment. Now, I'm talking about this in a traditional sense in terms of like the partner just buys into the practice and they're partners day one. There's obviously creative ways to bring partnerships into established offices and other offices as well. They can be a little bit more like strategically done and things like that. But I'm talking just purely from the person buys in and they're a partner. So that's a really challenging time to do it. And I don't typically recommend do that. If they get to that phase, like, I just don't like doing this. Honestly, my best advice is stick it out for 2 or 3 more years, get it to where it's a little bit larger. And if you still don't like doing it, then you should probably just sell the practice and go work for somebody else. That's usually the better route. Because if you wait 2 or 3 years, your equity value should grow as long as you're still growing, and you should be able to sell the practice for a pretty good amount of money comparatively to that day. You're really at that throw time frame of like when profitability really starts to hit. $600,000 to $800,000 revenue practices are not typically at very profitable comparatively to the $1 million to $1.5 million practices. And so if you just stick it out for a couple more years, assuming you are still growing, then you'll get to that phase where it's a lot more profitable. And then you can make the decision like, hey, I'm making good money now. Is it worth it now? Because if it is, then you can just continue on. If it's not, if you still don't like doing all the business stuff and all the running and the headaches of running a business, then at that point you can sell it and it's worth way more money now than it was just a couple of years ago for that $600,000 to $800,000 range. I recommend that more so than finding a partner usually, just because of all the issues that do happen in partnerships. So for the established office, for the practice that is upwards to that 1,500 patient to say 2,000 patient count, and they're thinking about bringing a partner in, because that really is the point where it may make some sense to be thinking about this. I don't typically recommend clients just bring a partner in and be like, hey, I feel like I need a partner. Call in an old buddy and have them fly up from Florida and all of a sudden become a business partner, and then they own half of your business. That's not what I recommend. What I recommend is generally having at least 6 months with an associate, if not 24 months with an associate, to start, number one, seeing if all those things align that we talked about in the prior episode, so that you make sure that you are aligned on all those different pieces of the puzzle, number one. And number two is that you've got to make sure that you're able to continue to scale through and grow through capacity. So bringing that person in should make it to where your new patient count is staying solid and strong, and you're able to continue on that path of filling up the roster. Because dentistry, in terms of a business, it's just a game of filling the roster up of patients. That's the game. So you've got to be able to fill that up, and bring the partner in should expand capacity to where you don't have to stop if you don't want to. If you get to full capacity and you're like, hey, I don't want to grow anymore, you have that right. You don't have to go and keep growing past that 1,500 patient count. You say, hey, I'm just going to be where I am and just focus on my patient base. That's absolutely something that you can do. But that is the point where I say, like, hey, $1 million to $1.5 million in revenue, a lot of things start making more sense of maybe bringing a partner in at that point in time if those different pieces come into play. Now you add into the fact that you can also have a partner come in that may have some specialties that you don't currently have. Let's say that you do Invisalign, but the new dentist does implants, then that can be great, because if you bring that person in, all of a sudden you've got a captive patient base of 1,500 patients that know, like, and trust you, and they've decided to trust you with their dentistry, that now you can offer implants to and be able to bring that in as a partnership thing. And you actually get some percentage of that because they're a partner. That makes a lot of sense to do that in dentistry if you can find the right people to be able to partner with. You get a double positive. You get the fact that you expand capacity, and you have somebody that can come in and do the specialties that you were not currently servicing to your patients, increases revenue, and the rising tide raises all boats, so to speak. But again, really important caveat, you got to be at a point where you're established, you got to be profitable, you got to be cash flowing. You've got to have a new patient flow, which is absolutely critical. And a lot of people miss this. They get to a point in their career like, hey, I want to bring a partner because I want to grow, but they don't have any way to be able to source new patients, and they just aren't coming in. And then you've got this new person coming in, and you kind of just tread water forever, and nobody ends up making more money. The old dentist ends up resenting the new dentist because they don't make as much money, and it's just a bad fit overall. So really, 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 really critical that you do have strong new patient flow. In terms of calculating that, there's an old rule of thumb that it's like 1.5 new patients per doctor day. So if you double the doctor days, you need to double that new patient flow number. Generally, I say if you're at 30 new patients a month, you're usually maintaining for an established office. If you're going to be trying to bring in a partner and continue to grow, you got to be that much above the 30 new patients a month rate. So say you need to be able to go from like 30 to about 70 if you bring in that partner and you're wanting to grow to capacity to build that person in, or even an associate, right? So the reason I said the 6 to 24 month time frame for the associate to turn into a partner is so that you can see, can I actually create this new patient flow? Can I actually get them filled up? Do they produce how I want them to produce? Do we connect on all the different stages that we talked about as well? And again, once that 24 months is up, that's whenever I would say you could start the discussions of maybe being a partner. And it's fine if you talk to them on the way in, like, hey, I'm considering doing this, but it's going to be a couple of years before we can make these talks happen. I think that's perfectly fair to do. So that's whenever we say, hey, maybe start bringing a partner in. The thing that I would be careful of is if you get in and you don't feel like they want to be a partner, you don't have to offer it to them. A lot of people actually don't want to be business owners. They just want to do dentistry and make a good living while doing that. And so that's something that I also recommend for people doing whenever they're considering that at the established level. So once you've gotten to past that established level and you're starting to grow even more, maybe you've got associates working for you now, you're maybe considering doing some partnerships or something like that, then that's whenever things can start getting even more complex. You get past 1, 2 partnerships, you get to multiple, like 2 or 3. So once you get past those 2 or 3 partners, you start scaling up, you start maybe doing this managed DSO model and all these other types of things. Then it can get pretty complex whenever those things happen. I guess I should have said this earlier. For all of these stages, when you bring a partner in, one of the most important things is the agreement. So a partnership agreement is a critical component of this because that's the playbook, it's the guideline, it's the rule book of how you're going to run this partnership from a logistical as well as financial perspective most times. It's got all the provisions in there. It's got all the safety net pieces of it. It's a really important piece of it. And an attorney obviously will help you do that. Whenever there's legal documents drafted, it's obviously an attorney that helps you with those things. At that stage, when you're getting to those multi-partnership deals, it starts getting really complex in terms of like how things are going to be ran, because there's so much that is like personal service side of things that goes into it whenever there's a medical piece going around with it. And then you start adding in all the different state laws and things like that. You really have to have attorneys to be able to help you with those things. At that point, if you're thinking about going the DSO route and things like that, obviously my personal perception of that is from the clients that have done it, it's a very mixed bag. I would say that there's some unicorns that are out there that have gone into partnership with bigger companies, like they've merged with other dental practices and groups, and they got lucky and they filled out a cap table at the right time and they got a really big multiple on their sale. Conversely, there's also people that sold for less than market rate to these bigger groups, and usually they don't really love the change a few years in. The exception to this, and I'll say this again, and I've talked about this a little bit earlier, is when the person, they don't want to be a business owner anymore, right? If you're done with the business side of things and you just want to work for somebody else and you don't really want to move, and like, and pieces of the puzzle like that you're just like, hey, I like my practice, I like the location, I just don't want to be a business owner anymore, I'm fine with doing dentistry still, then selling to a DSO isn't the absolute worst thing that you could do, because they will probably still pay you pretty well to continue working there, but you're going to make less money than you were to be a business owner almost all the time over a long time horizon. So it's a weird thing that like the longer that you sign up to work for them, the less likely you typically are to make more money long term, unless there's some just really, really rare circumstances occurring to where maybe you just decide you just didn't want to grow anymore because of all the business stuff was just overwhelming you so much. And then this DSO can step in and you actually do grow the practice more, and they're able to help you with maybe adding some more services and be able to give you a little bit more profit margin. Even then, you typically will make more owning the practice yourself long term, but not every time, for sure. Anyway, so I think I covered pretty much all the different life cycles of partnerships in here. The only thing I didn't really cover, which does get kind of confusing, is whenever you have 2 partners, you decide to bring in a 3rd partner, and a 4th partner, or a 5th partner. Kind of the same setup that I said before. At that point, it still becomes very much like, what is our current patient count? What is our new patient flow? Can we support this new doctor? How long does it take for us to get them in? How do we view them? Are they on the same wavelength as us and on all the different pieces of it? Because at a certain point, you get to be so large, if you have all these partners, that you've got to start introducing all these other elements. Like, if you become a $10 million dental practice, then all of a sudden you may have to have like an outsourced CFO or even like a CEO person who has all these really important responsibilities in relation to the operations of this practice of yours. You may have a COO that's a part of it as well, or you have an office manager, you have an operations director. There's just so much stuff that goes on in a growing business like that when you start hitting those bigger metric points that require way more heavy hitters when it comes to the responsibilities of running that business on a day-to-day basis. And so then all those caveats that I started with when talking about when there's like a business partner, all those start getting even more and more complex and more expensive and things like that too. There's definitely different ways you can do it. And there's definitely many ways to skin a cat when it comes to being in a partnership. The trick is finding the one that is right for you, as well as right for your potential partners, and being able to move forward with it. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I know it's been a lot of information about partnerships, but if you've never been in one before, I hope that you learned something new. And until next time, I'll see you later. Thanks for tuning in to the Tooth and Coin podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with a fellow dentist or a practice owner who could benefit. Your word of mouth helps us spread financial wisdom throughout the dental community. So until next time, keep building that thriving practice.